Our rights do not come to us because we belong to a group. It doesn't come to us because there's a gay group, a women's group, or a minority group, or whatever. Everybody should be treated equally because they're an individual. It should truly be a colorblind society.
This has been something I know Ron Paul's talked about and people have been talking about. I have to say, with all due respect, that I see no evidence of this actually taking place. I think this has been something that has been ginned up in certain blogs and the internet.
And there's only two parties that seem to have a problem in really understanding what's going on. You know, it's those Republicans and those Democrats.
Sometimes they'll say one thing to one crowd and something to another crowd, and I think that's something that nobody's ever accused me of doing. You know, I say the same thing no matter which year it is and which crowd.
We should voluntarily help a lot of people, but once we use coercion to bring about changes, then you've overstepped the bounds of personal liberty. And that's basically the way our government is run, by coercion. Whether you want to help this group, you got to take from this group. Whether or not you want to make this group better and make sure their habits are sound, that they don't gamble or smoke or drink, then you have to take away their freedoms to do this.
We don't have to have more courts and more prisons. We need to repeal the whole war on drugs. It isn't working.
I am the only candidate, Republican or Democrat, who would protect the minority against these vicious drug laws.
But I'm not somebody who believes in legalization of marijuana.
I don't think we should decriminalize it.
Well, if we're talking about pot, I'm not for the legalization of pot.
I don't support legalizing marijuana.
I believe that marijuana should be illegal in our country.
But how can people do this? How can an individual talk to you like that and say, well, I'm a compassionate conservative. I want you to suffer. That's what they're saying. You know, it's outrageous. And they don't know the history.
About 100 years ago or so, freedom was divided into two pieces: economic liberty and personal liberty. If you believe in civil liberties for personal choices, you ought to believe in economic choices as well.
Prostitution.
I think when you defend freedom, you defend freedom of choice, and you can't be picking and choosing how people use those freedoms.
The DEA raid of Emmeline's Collective Cooperative, a medical marijuana dispensary south of Market, comes just 1 week after the new president's administration seemed to be signaling they would stop such raids.
I don't believe government can legislate virtue. I can reject it personally and preach against it, whether it's drugs or prostitution, but
those decisions are made by the individuals in a free society and not by the nanny state.
The Patriot Act, the most abominable, unconstitutional, hateful, from the point of freedom, piece of legislation since the Alien and Sedition Acts in 1798.
16-year-old Ashton Lundeby's bedroom is nothing if not patriotic. American flags everywhere. But according to the United States government, this 10th grader, who has never been in trouble with the law before, is now a suspected terrorist.
U.S. officials have confirmed the Yemen-based Muslim cleric has become the first U.S. citizen added to a CIA list of targets for capture or killing. Anwar al-Awlaki is a U.S.-born cleric accused of having ties to the failed Christmas Day airline bombing and the shooting at Fort Hood.
President Obama has reportedly authorized the death penalty for an American citizen who has not been convicted of any crime, the evidence against whom has yet to see the light of day, who denies his guilt, and who has not been given the due process, including trial, guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. It is a power not even claimed by the Bush-Cheney administration, extending far beyond Bush-Cheney claims, which even the most conservative Supreme Court justice rejected.
Enough, enough. We don't need more Patriot Acts. We don't need more surveillance of our people. We don't need national ID cards. We don't need the suspension of habeas corpus. What we need is more freedom.
We need a Ron Paul in the White House more desperately now than we ever have at any time in our history.
When you have war, whether it's war against drugs, war against terrorism, war overseas, the mentality of the people change, and they're more willing to sacrifice their liberties in order to be safe and secure.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
I don't want any authoritarian to be successful.
Everybody somewhere between the ages of 18 and 25 will serve 3 months of basic training and understanding in a kind of civil defense.
A compulsory draft is far more typical of totalitarian nations than of democratic nations. The theory behind it leads directly to totalitarianism. It is absolutely opposed to the principles of individual liberty, which have always been considered a part of American democracy.
You were explaining about the Civil War, how it didn't need to be fought. And I was at first like, he's saying it didn't need to be fought. But when you explained it to me, I thought it was one of the most pragmatic, reasonable things I've ever heard a politician say.
Well, you know, the other nations in the West that had slavery all got rid of slavery without a civil war.
600,000 Americans died in a senseless civil war.
Every other major country of the world was able to get rid of slavery without a civil war. You could have paid for all the slaves and released them, and there were proposals like that. That's the way the British did it. Every major country in the world got rid of slavery without a civil war except us.
And this mythology that there are some religions that are religions of the sword and some are not, I'm sorry to say this, but it's bullshit.
My wife Carol's been sick and she's home and doing much better. And even in that event, I saw something very wonderful about it, because our Christian friends sent us good wishes and prayers, and our Jewish friends sent good wishes and prayers, and our Muslim friends sent us good wishes and prayers. And lo and behold, we received a lot of good wishes from some agnostics, some atheists, and we were delighted to get those as well. It confirms my conviction that freedom brings people together.
Freedom doesn't challenge people's personal values. They don't challenge their religious values. They only say, come together on your terms as long as you don't mess around with me.
We have an ominous responsibility right now. Those of us, and it sounds to me like most everybody that's here tonight, recognize that we do have a problem. So we have a responsibility for ourselves and our family and our country to do something about it. And that is to spread this message, to fully understand it so others will accept it. This is a very, very important campaign.
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it.
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its maximum hour of danger. You are that generation. This is your role. Now is that time. Freedom must be defended from every assailant in every corner of this country, from outside the country, from inside the country, and especially from the government that wants to take it away from us.
Are you going to run again in 2012?
Well, I might be running from somebody or running for Congress or who knows what.
It sounds to me like the revolution is alive and well.